Good day, class. Let us now talk about lesson 3 of unit 9, and that is literature from Visayas. So in this lesson, we are going to talk about the different literary pieces in the group of islands in the Visayas. So make sure that you have with you your notebooks and pens and jot down key points or salient points of our discussion, as well as questions that may arise so that we may be able to raise them during our online classes. So with that being said, let's now continue and let's now begin with our lesson. Let's first talk about our lesson objectives. It is stated very clearly that in this lesson, we aim to identify some of the major literary works from Visayas and relate the theme and message of literature from Visayas in the present context. So with that being said, I would like to emphasize in our discussion that what we are going to aim here is to understand how these literature or literary pieces can be related, can be integrated to the present day context that we experience from time to time. So here is a very essential question as we start our discussion. How does regional literature contribute to the identity of its people? So we talked about the influence and the importance of regional literature into the cultural impact in the Philippines. Now, how does regional literature contribute to the identity of its people? Now, as we answer this essential question during the course of our discussion, I would like also everybody to take down or to take note of these vocabulary words that we are going to encounter as we have our lesson. So these are very important vocabulary words that we need to remember and we need to take down or take note in order for us to understand better the lessons and the different examples that we are going to encounter in this lesson. First is schools. Schools is a noun which means groups of fish swimming in the same direction. Example: my toddler sister was fascinated by the large schools of fish in the giant aquarium we visited. Another is trot. Trot is a verb which means referring to horses, to move at a pace faster than a walk but slower than a run or a gallop. Example: my brother wanted to enjoy the view of the countryside, so we had the horse slow to a trot. Third is smear. Smear is a verb which means to damage someone's reputation with falsehoods or slander. Example: every election period, disreputable candidates try to smear their competitors. Another is thwart. Thwart is a verb which means to prevent something from happening or being accomplished. Example: in superhero movies, the protagonist usually manages to thwart the villain's plan. And lastly is scoundrel. Scoundrel is a noun which means an unscrupulous, disreputable person. Example: before he met the genie, Aladdin lived his life as a thief and a scoundrel. So these are the different literary words or vocabulary words that we are going to encounter during the course of this lesson. Make sure to take note and to jot them down as we are going to be making use of these lessons in the coming or in the different examples that we will be discussing. Now let's try to talk about the Visayas. First, the Visayas is the smallest island group in the Philippines. It is divided into three regions: the Western, Central, and Eastern Visayas. Major regional languages include Cebuano, Hiligaynon or Ilonggo, Kinaraya, and Waray. Now there are 7 main islands that comprises Visayas, and these are Bohol, Cebu, Panay, Samar, Negros, Leyte, and Masbate. Now talking about Visayas, there are different literary pieces from the Visayas that comes from different areas or different places. So we have the following. Visayan literature is comprised of poems that are called binalaybay, stories that are called asoy or sugilanon, riddles that are called paktakon, and proverbs that are translated to hurubaton. These are usually in two lines and rhymed. Lullabies called ili-ili, ambahan, which is a long song alternately sung by a soloist or chorus. Siday is a long poetic battle between two paid poets representing the two families in the pursuit of marriage. And Balitaw, which means a love song sung by a man and woman in a debating manner. So all of these are some of the major literary pieces or literature pieces in the Visayan Islands. Now let's begin with the examples of Visayan literature. In Western Visayas, here are two of the examples of Visayan literature. We have Hinilawud, which is the oldest and perhaps the most well-known epic of Panay. Hinilawud narrates the story of the goddess of the eastern sky named Alonsina, who reached the age of maidenhood. Every god from different places tried to win her heart. Soon, the goddess decided to marry a mortal from Halawud, Datu Paubari. So that's where the story or the plot of the story revolves in Hinilawud. Another is the fall of Pulubulak. This is a tale from Panay about the 7 deadly sins. So it is also related to the 7 deadly sins that are taught in the Bible or the Christian Bible. Another are different Visayan literature in the eastern region or the eastern Visayas. We have Buwaon and Tutuon. This is a story of Waray folktale with the English translation Falsehood and Truth. It is about two friends named Buwaon and Tutuon who could not find work. So they decided to go away from their place to look for their fortune elsewhere. And from the eastern Visayas, we have Si Amomongo at Si Ipot-Ipot. This is a fable about a gorilla and a firefly. The lesson it conveys is that one should never belittle those who are small because they could do big things that big people cannot do. And there are also Visayan literature or examples of Visayan literature from Central Visayas. To name a few, we have Sikalak and Sikavay. This is a Visayan creation myth about Kaptan and Magwayan, who are both gods who created earth and all living things. Kaptan planted a bamboo in the garden. One day, it broke into 2 sections, and out stepped a man and a woman who were respectively named Sikalak and Sikavay. Another example is Catalina of Dumaguete. This is a legend about a 16-year-old girl named Catalina who was very beautiful and industrious but with many strange ways. She was said to have mysterious powers and was said to have saved Dumaguete from the Moros. So those are only 2 or few of the many examples of Visayan literature in Eastern, Western, and Central Visayas. So, with that being said, here is an example of a literary piece that we have discussed, Buwaon and Tutuon, which is a Waray folktale. So let me now read to you a Waray folktale entitled Buwaon and Tutuon. Once upon a time, there were 2 friends, Buwaon and Tutuon. They couldn't find work, so they decided to leave their hometown to look for their fortune somewhere else. They got hungry. They brought rice with them, and then they mounted their horses. As they went on, they got hungry. From a distance, they saw a coral reef. They got off their horses and headed to the reef to catch some fish. They caught schools of fish, but they were very tiny. Tutuon forgot his hunger. He returned the fish he caught to the reef. Buwaon got angry. How will we able to eat? He scolded Tutuon. Never mind, Buwaon, they are so tiny. They will still grow bigger, Tutuon replied. They rode their horses again. After a distance, they saw a dead man. Totoon asked Buwaon to stop so they could bury the body. But Buwaon got angry. Are you out of your mind? If somebody sees us, they'll think we killed him. But we should show mercy. There is a way of finding the truth. Well, if you won't help me, then I will bury him by myself. You may go onward if you please. I will follow later, said Totoon. Buwaon went ahead while Totoon dug a grave for the body. Then he carried the dead person and buried him. He prayed over it, then went on his journey. Buwaon could not bear to leave him, so he returned for Totoon. They set out together again. Trotting along, they heard babies crying. They went towards the direction of the sounds. They found hungry baby eagles in a nest. Let's stop for a while and feed the eagles, suggested Totoon. Then Buwaon saw that Totoon was going to kill his horse. Are you foolish? When they grow up, they'll prey on you. Let's go on. We're already delayed, Buwaon said. Don't mind me. I pity these baby eagles. Anyway, no debt goes unpaid. Go ahead, I'll just follow. If you go on with your silly ideas, I'll not give you a ride, threatened Buwaon. Then I'll walk, decided Totoon. Even if I go slowly, I'll still reach my destination. After killing his horse, he fed the eagles. When they fell asleep, Totoon left. Buwaon again returned to give Totoon a ride. Far ahead, they saw a palace. Let's go, suggested Buwaon. Let's ask the king for work. They knocked at the palace door. They were told to enter, but since it was late, they were not granted any audience with the king. They slept in the palace. You see, taunted Buwaon, if you did not delay our trip, we should have been able to eat. You are the cause of all of this. They went to sleep nevertheless, since they were so tired from their journey. After a while, Totoon heard someone calling his name. Rise, Totoon, and listen. In the morning, when the king calls you for breakfast, don't eat at once. On the table, you'll see a pen and some cooking utensils. Sit near the pen, and your future will be bright. Don't be surprised. I am the dead person whom you buried. I have come back to pay you back for the kindness you showed me. Everything went silent, and Totoon fell asleep again. In the morning, the two friends were called for breakfast by the king. As Totoon was told the night before, he saw the pen and some cooking utensils on the table. Buwaon sat down near the utensils without a thought and began eating. Totoon sat by the pen as he was instructed. You, Totoon, will become my secretary, while you, Buwaon, will become my cook, announced the king. At first, Buwaon was glad. His work meant plenty of food, so he would not go hungry. But as time went on, he began to envy Totoon, for the latter was not fatigued from his job. Buwaon soon thought of smearing the name of his friend out of spite. One day, Buwaon went to the king to report that he heard Totoon say that the latter would be able to find the ring of the king lost within 3 days, and the reward will be marriage to the princess. Of course, the king got angry, for he did not say such thing. He had Totoon summoned to his hall. Totoon protested the accusation, but the angry king would not listen to him. Go, look for the ring then, and if you find it, you will have the princess for a reward. But if you fail, you will lose your head, announced the king. Totoon did not say anything. He got a paddle and rowed far out to sea. There he cried because of his fate. Not long after, he heard a voice. It was a fish asking him why he was crying. Totoon unburdened his problem. After listening, the fish dived deep into the sea. When it surfaced, many other fish came up with it, each one with a ring in its mouth. Totoon looked among the rings. The king's ring was not there. The fish dove again. When they came up, one had the king's ring in his mouth. Totoon thanked the fish. "Don't mention it," said the fish. "We are only paying you back for the kindness you showed us before, when you threw us back into the reef." Then they left. The king rejoiced that the ring had been found. He held a banquet. Now, Buwaon had plenty of work again. He did not like it. At the banquet, the king announced the forthcoming marriage of Totoon and the princess. Buwaon was very angry. There would be much work ahead. He thought of a plan to thwart the wedding, but it did not succeed. After the wedding, Buwaon went to the king. "Your Majesty," he said, "I heard Totoon say that on the third day the princess will give birth." The king got mad. He summoned Totoon once more. "Do you mean to say that you had an affair with the princess even before you got married? You scoundrel! But since you're already my child, I can't do anything. However, it must happen as you've said. The princess will give birth 3 days from now. If not, you'll surely lose your head." Totoon cried in despair. The princess comforted him by saying she'd talk with her father, but he couldn't be calmed. After a while, an eagle came. "Don't cry, Totoon," she began. "I'll help you in payment for the help you gave my children. Get a midwife and talk to her. I'll bring you a newly born child." Then the eagle flew away. When she came back, she carried with her an infant, still dripping with blood. In the bedroom, the midwife acted as if there really was a delivery. When the king awoke, he heard the cries of an infant. He was amazed that the princess did give birth. He forgot his anger. "It must be a miracle," he exclaimed. So with that being said, what do you think is the moral of this story? Make sure to answer these guide questions in order for us to find out what the story is all about or what the story is trying to convey to all of us. Now, let's try to integrate the values that we have learned out of the discussions that we've had with the literature from the Visayas. Here is a very interesting question that I want you to ponder. How does learning about literature from Visayas help you understand your fellow Filipinos better? Does this make you more interested to the different cultures influencing the literature of the Visayas Islands? What do you think is the most important component of the literature from the Visayas in understanding our fellow Filipinos better?